Welcome to One on One with the Grim One. I am your host, the Slayer of Posers, Master of Disaster, the most electrifying man in corpse entertainment, the Necrosexual. And joining me on this dangerous meeting, we have Kimmo from Finland's death metal dealers, Lantern. Kimmo, how the hell are you, baby?
I'm good. How are you?
I feel grim.
Yeah, same here. Always good.
Excellent. So Lantern, you have a crushing new album out on Dark Descent Records known as Dimensions. And my hat is off to you, sir. It is totally brutal and filled with all sorts of dark and dank, cavernous, genre-blending riffs, and we will talk about that a little bit later. But first, this is one-on-one with the Grim One, so that means that every episode, my guest selects one record that holds a special place in their hearts. So, Kimmo, take it away, baby. Tell us about the record we're going to geek out over.
Okay, do you mind if I backtrack a bit? Because I think it needs a bit of history.
Please. I got all day, baby.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the thing is that when I started to listen to metal music, I started to steer towards the darker and more violent kind of black and death metal pretty quickly, like Mayhem and Bathory and whatnot, and from the field of death metal, pretty much Possessed and Morbid Angel and so forth. But then, on the other hand, I was very much into heavy metal and even rock and classic rock, like from bands like Deep Purple to Led Zeppelin, and then most importantly, Black Sabbath and Judas Priest. And then all of a sudden, these two genres kind of shake hands when I heard Don't Break the Oath by Mercyful Fate. Quite a few years after I had started to listen to metal in the first place. And Don't Break the Oath was the cornerstone for me to understand that you could make music that was like all hellfire and witchcraft, but had melodies and a good sense of musicality also. And I think that's also something that has subconsciously lingered to Lantern's material also, because we're a distinct death metal band or a black metal band, however you wish to interpret that, but we still have this kind of weird musicality to our music, and I think that's mostly thanks to bands like Mercyful Fate and Judas Priest, which I have always liked very much.
Indeed, and that is one thing I enjoyed about your new album, Dimension, is it's a very fine balance between the heavy death metal, skull crush and brutality, and the melody, and that is certainly one of the hallmarks of Mercyful Fate. And like you said, baby, magic, fire, and brimstone right off the cover. You look at that album cover and you know you're in for a treat. And once you put that record on, it only gets better.
Yeah, it just keeps on growing until the end. And one thing worth mentioning is that, the interlude before Come to the Sabbath was the name To the One Away, or whatever that was called. That like a really calm and almost acoustic piece. Kind of like a small break before the final epic song of the album. I think that's something we've used on the latter albums also, well, except maybe for Dimensions, but on Below and Morphosis, we always had these interludes leading the way to the final songs of the album, like Calm Before the Storm.
Indeed. King Diamond and Mercyful Fate blazing the way for the Lantern to follow with that totally morbid glow. But I think as well on Dimensions, I seem to remember there was like an acoustic song, maybe track 3 or track 4, or a song that started off with an instrumental that sounded a little bit acoustic. So maybe even on your new album, there's some of that as well, just not the penultimate song.
Yeah, Portraits. That's also like an interlude. It starts with semi-clean guitars. And also on our previous album, we used some acoustic guitars, but just very briefly on our instrumental song, Necrotic Epiphanies. But of course, those songs will be really hard to play live, so we'll be trying to avoid including instruments that we cannot take on stage.
Well, you don't want to be one of those black metal bands with a laptop for all the samples between songs?
we haven't gone there at least yet.
Yeah, work smart, not hard, baby. Well, I can certainly understand that. So tell me, Kimmo, what's your favorite Mercyful Fate song?
Well, Come to the Sabbath is a pretty strong contender, but
Hell
I have
yeah.
a weak spot for Welcome Princess of Hell and Gypsy also. Like, the B-side of Don't Break the Oath is pure gold, if you ask me. Of course, the whole album is something that doesn't have any filler or killer, but if I have to choose, then maybe Come to the Sabbath. I think it's pretty standard, but it's a hell of a good song.
Choose a favorite song, but I will tell you a little story. I was lucky enough to see the King and Company in Philadelphia, and during that concert, it ended up being recorded for their live DVD, Songs for the Dead. So that was pretty awesome to be in on that piece of heavy metal history captured in time. They played 2 classic songs. They played Melissa, and of course, they played Come to the Sabbath. And hearing that song live, I think really cemented my opinion of that as probably being my favorite song off the album, because it's super heavy and it's got a real funky groove, especially at the end. It's something you want to bang your head to, but it also kind of makes you want to dance.
Yeah, can you see the goosebumps? I don't know.
Yeah.
Just maybe.
Yeah, Goosebumps are totally metal.
Yeah. I'm really hoping that this COVID-19 situation allows Mercyful Fate to play those shows they've been planning, so I could go see one of them. That'd be a dream come true.
A wet dream come true, you can say. And you mentioned before some of your other heavy metal heroes like Bathory and Mayhem, of course. But tell me, what was the metal band that you lost your musical virginity to?
Strangely enough, I think the first metal album I've ever bought was Born of the Flickering by Old Man's Child, but still it wasn't like the mind-blowing experience. Yeah, but after that I started to listen to bands like Wasp, and well, I think Wasp's Inside the Electric Circus was one of the game changers, and of course then again Mayhem's The Mysteries of Satanas, and the list is very long if I start to think about it, but those were one of the most crucial experiences for me back in the day.
Indeed. And you, sir, from a country known as Finland, which has one of the highest numbers of metal bands in the world per capita, and of course, of all the regional flavorings of heavy metal, the Finnish style of death metal is particularly eclectic and brutal. Bands like Demolich and Demigod, Adremelik, Depravity. So what does Finnish death metal mean to you?
Well, of course, there's Demilik who are from the same town as we are. But to me, the topmost bands are Demigod and maybe Old Sentenced. Those are like the top Finnish death metal bands with the sound that really strike to me. I don't know. It has changed a bit over the years, but I think like bands like Corpses that are also on Dark Descent Records are kind of like carrying the torch still, playing the really Finnish style of death metal, if you ask me. If almost without exception, it's very dark and, well, I don't know how else to put it, but.
Tell me in your own words, how do you describe the death metal musical assault that is Lantern?
Well, of course, some people might have their opinions about Lantern being pure death metal, but I still think that Lantern is somewhere close to the era when death and black metal and thrash metal were harder to define, like in the early 90s or even late 80s. So I think it's a wild mixture of many kind of styles, but still I think we can put ourselves under the banner of death metal, mostly because of our lyrical content separating us from, say, black metal bands and so forth. But speaking about the music, we've spoken about melodies. We, of course, have a lot of those going on, but Lantern is definitely not a melodic death metal band, but we just somehow managed to cram the musicality into this whirlwind of blistering speed and really stormy compositions. And of course, there are the signature leads that people have grown to like, I suppose. chilling and with a lot of reverb and even delay nowadays. And of course, once you hear our vocalist's signature death metal bark, as some say, you cannot be mistaken by who's behind the microphone. Those are some of the key elements of Lantern, in my opinion.
Blistering speed, indeed. So you talked about the lyrical content as well as the melodic inspiration of Lantern. Tell me about what inspired you on the songwriting process for your new album, Dimensions.
Well, the new album is, I like to think it as a collection of short stories put to music, and all of the songs deal with horror, basically. So there's nothing that deep going on there. But however, as the album title indicates, if you think about the word dimensions, it has many meanings to it. And so the big picture is what makes the whole entity of the album a bit deeper than just a collection of songs, because it starts with a strange nebula. And as you can think, it refers to dimensions far above, and only to descend towards different kind of dimensions and eventually leading into the final song that takes the listener beneath the surface of the sea, like as the name of the song indicates, monolithic abyssal dimensions. So it's like a linear plunge from far above to far below as a whole. Hope that clarified a bit.
Yes, and I particularly enjoyed the whole album, but especially the 14-minute monolithic epic closing track, which also sounded like it had a little bit of a bass solo in there. Am I correct?
You say bass solo.
Yeah, was that a bass solo I heard?
Yeah, this is a instrument my friend built me. It has cello strings, and it's like a cigar box guitar.
Wow. So that's metal as fuck.
Well, this is Lantern as fuck, I'd say.
Yeah.
This is that tuned like a mandolin. It's not in tune, but still. So it was a bit harder to play than just a bass solo.
Wow, yeah, that sounded cool. I was wondering what that was, because it sounded a little bit bassy, but then it also sounded like a cigar box with cello strings, as we found out.
I was originally intending to play that piece with a bow, like with the cello, but
yeah,
that shape of that instrument makes it kind of hard to play with a bow. So I just decided to treat it as a guitar or a bass.
So your new album, Dimensions, it is a 40-minute rager. If there was one song you would tell people to listen to off that album, what would you suggest that they put on and play loud?
Well, I think that's the last one, Monolithic Abyssal Dimensions, because I think that's kind of like my magnum opus, the epic song I have had coming from this head of mine for all these years I've been composing metal. Like, it has everything I want to write metal-wise, I think. And I think that's the key song of the album, and maybe even the best song of Lantern, at least if you're listening to our vocalist. I think that's his official opinion, and many other people's.
Vocalist approved. And yes, it has some ferocious vocals on the record throughout. And I also enjoy that they're extreme death metal vocals, but I can also tell what the guy is saying. And I always appreciate when there's lyrical clarity. I like the best of both worlds, because on one hand, you want it to sound aggressive and harsh, but it's also nice to tell what the story is.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm really happy that he has invented this style of singing that gives more room for the lyrics, because the lyric department is something that I put a lot of time and effort in. So I'm glad that you necessarily don't need the booklet all the time in your hands when you explore the content.
So Lantern, you have your killer new album out, Dimensions. Shows aren't happening anytime soon, hopefully in the near future or the next year. But aside from that, what else is in the future for Lantern, or just for yourself, musically speaking?
Well, right now we're really hoping to play those gigs. That's our main goal right now. And we have a few shows in Finland lined up, one for the coming October and one for the next February, which I think might actually be quite plausible. But shows are our main focal point right now, but with the situation going on, I don't know. I've heard that our rhythm guitarist has a bunch of riffs, so we might jam those and see if we can squeeze more songs that are not from my pen, but from his, like Shrine of Revelation from the newest album. It's the only song that I haven't written, so we'll see if Saint Belial can provide us some new Lantern riffs and songs while we wait for shows.
Excellent. Well, I wish you luck as you traverse the dark hallways of the Riff Factory with your rhythm guitarist, with whatever new materials are spawned forth. And hey, Kimmo, tell us, what do you want to say to all the heavy metal heathens watching at home?
That's always the hardest question. Tell what you want. Well, if you still want to buy a copy of the latest album, you can always approach the band through Facebook or even Instagram or emailing us on the topic. But be forewarned that the Finnish postcosts are pretty brutal, especially outside Europe. So in that case, I endorse you to contact our label, Dark Descendant. Well, I really hope that this situation blows over sooner rather than later so that we can return on stages and deliver more live Lantern attacks for you people.
Lantern attack sounds like something I could look forward to as well. Hey, Kimmo, baby, thank you for going one-on-one with the Grim One. Stay healthy, stay heavy, and stay death.
Yeah, thank you very much.